Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Nifemi. And also thank you, Mimi. You see, we've been able to understand what social listening is. And Nifemi has gone further to let us know that, brands don't have to just focus on vanity metrics, but also they have to understand how those numbers, how they, do testing and measuring and make sure they use those numbers to adjust their brand strategy. Thank you so much again, Nifemi. So yeah, let's move to the next question. But before I do that, please, if you have any question for our speakers today, Mimi and Nifemi, if you have questions for them, please go ahead and drop it on the comment section, especially questions that are around our conversation, around the social listening for brands that want to win. If you have questions around that, please drop it on the chat session and I will go through them. I will read it out and, we'll answer the question that you have. So yeah, let's move to the next question I have for the our speakers. So yeah, the question is this. So there's this some common mistakes brands make. I know Nifemi has been able to like touch it in terms of brands focusing only on the vanity matrix and all of that, but then some brands also make this mistake of thinking they are listening to their audience, um but they are not actually doing that, right? They are actually doing the vanity metrics or not properly listening. So how do we like walk these brands to, like, what are the strategy for drafting out the map for social listening, more like a guideline, a map, like road, like more like a roadmap for brands to like follow through for their social listening, to say, okay, this is the first thing you do, the second thing you do. I know the family have mentioned things like testing and measuring. So are they like other things, the brands have to like put into consideration when they are doing social listening for their brands, or they are trying to understand their audience? I think maybe Mimi or Nifemi can take this. Anybody?
Why are you bending your head? Like, is you now spoken?
I was waiting for one person to be called, but I'll start and then Anthony can add to it. I think
Okay.
the first thing is to know what's like we said. If you don't know what you're trying to do, or what the objective is, it makes things a bit difficult, right? So, what's the objective, right? And then once we know what the objective is, are we trying to find out, from a category point of view, what are they talking about? Are we trying to find out what influencers will work for me, for example? Are we like, what's the objective? And then based on that, we can now develop the actual strategy. And then, like Ifemi said, obviously monitor, track. And because social is very it's not static, right? It's very flexible. We can always tweak, can always make changes, because we are plugged in and connected, and seeing how the audience is responding and seeing what the conversations are like, right, about the campaign or about whatever it is that we're doing. I think the one point I would like to call out is that, like we said, it's the objective. Why are we doing what we're doing, right? So from a brand point of view, if all I'm trying to do is find out what are the conversations that somebody's having about my category, for example, right? Then what I'm going to do is going to be very different. It's going to be more top line. It's going to be more just trends, conversations, language, things like that. But then if I'm actually just tracking an actual campaign, or I'm tracking what the brand problem is, that's also a very different problem. So the objective is different, and the strategy that I'm going to roll out for that is also going to be very different. But I'll let the thought leader speak to it.
So I think an example we can use is like influencers, and I think that kind of resonates with almost everybody on the call, because even if you're not like a brand person, you kind of have an idea of how influencers work. So typically, and I may be wrong, I'm barely on the brand side, so maybe on the brand side, so she can guide. But typically, from my understanding, when brands are considering to use influencers, part of the first thing that they think about is, this person is the one that is trending now. Let's go and use them so that they will give you the numbers that you want. And that's not a bad idea at all, because you can get actual value from paying someone that is actually trending to give you the numbers that you want. But the first question that I would ask if I was the one working in that process is, firstly, does this person really matter to my brand? Secondly, the followers number does not guarantee engagement number. If you look at, there are people that have like millions of followers and their engagement is 2%. So if you do the math, it's good to have that number, yeah. But if you have like 2 million followers and your engagement is 0.5% for your own personal post, for a brand post that comes on your page, that number will typically drop to like 0.25. Let's say half of your 0.5. So what you're thinking about, what you should start thinking about is, if this person typically has this type of followership or this type of responses on his account or account, you're asking yourself to say, it means that I don't know what 2 million is, but it is what that number is that you would eventually be able to work with in terms of the people that would engage with your brand. And if there is not somebody that has like a 1 million less followers than them and they have like a 45%, you think about it, first of all, you're saving money. But it's hard to find someone for 5% engagement, let's be honest. But you're saving money, but also you're getting more value. That's the first thing. The second thing with influencers is not all platforms are the same for influencers. So it's a nice thing to sort of understand how they play across platforms and then begin to think about how you want to use it. I'm using influencers as an example alone because it's sort of helping me break it down to think about what the question was asked for and how they play across platforms. And so another thing that you should also consider is when you're speaking to influencers, is the question of what themes or what cloud do you necessarily find around these guys. So because it also gives you more opportunity of the type of conversations that you want to have. So use Elayi Wasabi, for example. He's a comedian. And so typically the type of post that you would get would be comic driven. But even with the comic, there is the empowerment part of it, which is the GNCC. Don't worry, I watch Wally, so I have an idea. It's the GNCC part. And so if you are running a campaign that has an empowerment thing around it, part of what you can already tell that there's a layer of empowerment amongst this guy's content that I can pick out from and use. So you are not asking him alone to just post and stuff or just do irregular content. You can be a bit more specific to say, I want this thing to go around the empowerment theme which you speak through in GNCC, because that kind of captures what I am looking out for. And so those are ways that you can go beyond. Then in terms of measurement at the end for influencers, I think you should always have like metrics to say, for this guy, I want whatever you're doing to move my followers by 5% or to move my engagement numbers by this, or find the numbers and actually track it. So it's as simple as saying, and even if you don't have tools to track it, okay, you use Mimi for influencer campaign today. What was your followers number? 515K. You told that by the end of 3 months, when this campaign is over with you, we want to grow by 5%. What is that number? And every week, you put the number that has gone through. And because if you wait to the end of the campaign, you don't have the chance to optimize. To say, and by using just pure Excel sheets here, we're not even going to like actual tracking. You don't have a chance to optimize, and you don't have a chance to change stuff. You don't have a chance to push things further. So you're like, okay, Mimi, the last 2 weeks, this post that you put for us, even if we aggregate 5 posts, this one dropped our followers by 15% though. What are the things that we should do? And then you put the next one and you said it grows, you put the next one, it grows, and you're able to easily just measure. Yes, you want to have very high likes. Yes, you want to have very high engagement, you want to have people sharing it. But at the end of the day, Mimi is a brand manager. They're not going to pay you if Lipton is not selling. And at the end of the day, like, truthfully, these numbers are great, but what brand really wants is to say that our products are getting to the right people and are being bought by these people. So whatever we are doing should actually revolve around this, and there are like some sub metrics that you can pull out to be able to get the effect that you need. So yeah, I'll stop talking now. Chinaza, you can.
Okay. Thank you, Nifemi, and also thank you, Mimi. Please, I'm not seeing the clapping emoji. I'm not seeing our favorite emoji. I believe we are getting lots of insights from this conversation today. Again, if you have questions for our speakers, drop it on the in-call message session of this call. You can drop it. Maybe later, if we have more time, you can raise your hand to speak. But while we wait for that, you can drop your questions on the comment section. Yeah, I see all of our emojis. Thank you all for that. So, yeah, thank you again, Nifemi and Mimi. You were able to the key things for me, if I have to just bring it out in key bullet points, Mimi mentioned understanding the objective. You need to understand the objective before you start even thinking of the strategy and planning to use for your social listening. And also, Nifemi talked about not even waiting for your campaign to end before you start listening, right? You listen to optimize the campaign while it's on, and testing, measuring, and also adjusting the campaign at any point. I think there's question on the chat session. Okay, there's a question on the chat session. Let's take that question before we move to the questions we have. So yeah, Glory Ohojafor is asking, how do you balance listening to your audience and sticking to your brand's voice or values? This is an interesting question. How do you balance listening to your audience and sticking to your brand's voice or values? I think I shouldn't call any name at this point. Nifemi or Mimi, anybody can take this.
Okay, let me address it to the best of my ability. So how do you balance listening to your audience and sticking to your brand voice or value? So I'm assuming that this is a brand that, has very clear, like your brand book is as detailed as possible. So your brand is built, right? Already set. So you know what your brand is like. There's nothing, you're listening to your brand, listening to your audience will not affect your brand voice or values. How you respond that now shows your brand's voice or values, but you're just listening. Right. So listening is, what are they saying? What are they talking about? How are they reacting? What do they care about? What are the things or the trends that are going on right now from my audience point of view, right? Then where your brand's voice or value comes in is what you respond to or how you respond, right? So there's almost up until the point of your brand responding or up until the point of your brand doing something about what they are hearing, it doesn't affect your brand's voice or values. All you're doing right now is listening. All you're doing right now, is picking out the insights, and pulling out the data points and things like that. The point where it not intercepts your brand voice or values is how you respond, which obviously, like we should know, I respond based on how my brand will respond. If my brand is irreverent, if my brand is a joke, a brand that is very funny, very comical, I respond in that light. Or if my brand is kind of brand that doesn't do such and such, as long as it's not something that is directly impeding on my growth or on the way I can engage with my audience, then I stick, with that brand voice or brand values. But like I said, the exception to this is if the feedback from the audience or the feedback or the conversation I'm seeing around my brand or conversation I'm seeing around the category is completely, is completely in the opposing everything that my brand stands for. Then it's a bigger problem. You understand? Then it's not just a social campaign or anything like that. Then it's something that I have to go and sit down as a brand team and understand that is our strategy completely wrong? Is our brand, the way we speak completely wrong, which would be very, these are rare instances. But like I said, to summarize, listening in itself does not affect your brand's voice or values. It's the point at which you start responding or the point at which you start, planning based on what the audience is saying, that you have to find a way to maintain your brand voice of values, because that's set. There must be a reason why that has been chosen, except you guys are rebranding, which, we can get to a whole conversation around rebranding. That's a whole different ballgame. But except you guys are rebranding, then responding should still be in line with your brand's voice of values. Nifemi is itching to say something. So
no, I'm actually not itching to say anything. I'm very okay. I think Mimi is spot on. I don't have any other thing to add to it, because like listening does not stop your brand from meeting its values. It doesn't. So people that are going to say that they want to create a brief so that they can start sounding like action bitters is not necessarily it's not a listening problem. It's just like you don't understand what your brand should sound like, basically. So I don't think the problem is actually listening. The problem is that you don't kind of really know what your brand should sound like. And so you're just kind of trying to get every other person's brand or every conversation to be like you, basically. Chinaza, you're muted.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.